And I apologize for the jokes.
The Laminator. Get to the shearing.
This ain't gonna get any better, is it?
Nope.
All right, here we go. Today is Monday, February 15th, 2016, and this is episode 149 of the Defensive Security Podcast. My name is Jerry Bell, and joining me tonight, as always, is Mr. Andrew Callett.
Hello, Jerry. How are you, sir?
I am wonderful. How are you?
I am doing pretty well. Happy Monday to you.
Likewise, we made it through another one.
We survived another Monday. Hopefully your weekend went well, and at least in the U.S. we had this silly thing called Valentine's Day, but I think you sent your wife out of town for Valentine's Day, didn't you?
She left me, so...
Well, whoever had February 2016 square for when Jerry gets left by his wife, please come pick up your winnings.
They went on vacation, so...
Oh.
Yeah.
Never mind.
Whatever.
Without you? They went without you?
Yeah. Well, I've got a dog to take care of and work and all that stuff.
Man. Well, you get to podcast with me. That's almost worth it.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And by the way, the thoughts and opinions we express on the show are ours and do not represent those of our employer. And that's particularly important tonight, and you will understand why shortly. So Andy, I have a question for you.
Okay, I'm ready. What's your question, Jerry?
So, all of these APTs, right? That we are we're so used to, right? Who do we think perpetrates those, right? Who's generally attributed as pulling those off?
You mean like North Korea?
Yeah, generally they're
other states that are also nations.
Right. But actually, that's not technically true.
No,
it has been discovered that there's this secret shadowy group that actually is doing these. And you know what that group is called?
I don't know. This is breaking news. I was unaware of this shadowy group.
The Illuminati.
Wow.
Yes. Yep.
I'm just going to let that sit out there and just
there you go.
Ruminate on that.
This is for you, David. This is all for you, buddy.
Wow.
So yeah, let's go ahead and get into some stories. I've got more, by the way.
I don't think anybody's left. I think they all just turned us off.
That's okay. We'll keep going.
All right.
I'm gonna soldier on.
What was it? What was that again? Say it for me again.
The Illuminati.
The Illuminati.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So our first story tonight comes from Tripwire.com, and the title is, and by the way, we should have some sirens going for this one. Cisco patches critical ASI buffer overflow vulnerability. And, the most sad part about this is that, Dwight Eisenhower has got to be just rolling in his grave about this protocol named after him.
I don't know that it was named after him, actually. I'm not sure of that fact. Have we checked that on Wikipedia?
It's called Ike.
Has anyone checked Snoops.com?
Did you say Snoops?
Snopes. Snoops. Whatever.
So yeah.
All right. So Dwight's protocol.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm still recovering from your joke. Joke in quotes there. Wow. Okay. So this is huge, actually, for a remote code exploit on Cisco ASAs, and there's about a bazillion Cisco ASAs out in the world running on the edge of networks.
That is absolutely right, and I guess it's affects a very wide swath of versions of the firmware or versions of the software, and there's also, I think, a lot of debate about what it actually takes to mitigate this. So it's not necessarily that you can put and this is, by the way, been the topic of some debate, is can you just filter out, port 500 or 4500 to only the IP addresses you want? And some of the debate has been, well, does that ingestion happen before the ACLs are applied? I don't actually know the truth. But
Right. So which order is it applied on the stack when it's coming in through the interface?
Yeah, and that kind of makes, that's problematic, because on the one hand, if you can say, well, most people these days only use IPsec for point-to-point VPNs, and so you really don't need to have these ports kind of open to the world. You don't need people coming randomly sending you port 500 or 4500 traffic. And so you should be able to filter those down, but maybe that doesn't work. But I will tell you,
the vast majority of people probably have that wide open, because this is likely being used as a VPN concentrator. And for business reasons, people stand up and tear down VPNs all the time.
Yeah, I suppose.
And potentially, possibly, remote clients for desktop clients. I'm not sure if you're running something like Cisco AnyConnect coming into a Cisco ASA. I'd have to check what ports it comes in on, but it may be coming in at like 500 or UDP 500 as well.
I'm pretty sure those are tunneled over 443 now.
I think they can be. I don't know that they have to be.
Well, that's fair.
So, yeah, I think a lot have gone SSL for compatibility and ease of use reasons. But you're correct on the versions. Huge swath of versions. 7.2, 8.2, 8.3, 8.4, 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, 9.0, 9.1, 9.2, 9.3, 9.4, 9.5. Huge install base running all that code.
Yeah. So get this. It's a firewall with remote code execution possibility, right? There hasn't, up to now, there hasn't been a proof of concept released, and there hasn't been any known exploitation.
But a lot of scanning.
Yeah, lots of scanning, as you might expect. Right. But no known exploits. I have heard that there's an expectation that when an exploit is found, it will probably be a denial service for a while, and then maybe somebody will figure out how to do remote code execution. But I think one of the really problematic things here, it's tomato, right, is that this bug was disclosed through a blog post which was extremely detailed. Yep. And a fascinating read, by the way. I mean, I'm not no dig on that person.
Well, let's give them credit. Exodus Intelligence.
There you go.
Was the group that found and reported this, and I guess did responsible disclosure, quote unquote, because there was patches released the same day their blog post went live.
Yeah, I think that's right. But the write up is extremely detailed, very interesting, and also I found it really interesting that they don't use Cisco in their ASA operating system. They don't use DEP or ASLR or anything like that, and which is really what made this become a real big problem, because there's no mitigation.
Yeah.
So anyway, patch your stuff.
Yeah, this is a pretty big deal. You rarely see this sort of thing happen. And this bug has been out there for a really, really long time. So if I put my tinfoil hat on, it makes you wonder if this was a known zero-day possibly being exploited by anyone else during, many, many years this was out in production.
Like maybe the Illuminati?
How do they type? That's my question.
I don't know.
I mean, the hooves.
They have
and the keyboard.
they have people for that.
Human slaves serve the Illuminati?
I can only assume.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a pretty big deal. The other challenge is, you get a lot of folks. How do I say this politically correctly? In general, I will say that folks who have come up through the Cisco ecosystem don't like to patch their stuff because it is a key component to the network infrastructure, and they don't like downtime. And in general, if it isn't broken, don't patch it. So if you look at the tendency to patch a server versus a piece of networking gear, and this applies, by the way, also to other other firewalls in general. But Cisco folks in general seem highly reluctant to patch as a broad generalization compared to other types of sysadmins.
I think that's right. There is another thing that I've come to understand. There's I don't fully understand all of the circumstances behind when this is a problem or not, but some people are having to upgrade the amount of memory in their routers in order to apply the patch.
Well, I think it depends on what version they're running.
Yes, it does. Yep.
Yeah. And if you've got some really old gear, you may not, and if you're running especially something that's out, end of life that they didn't patch for, and there's some of that. If you look at their advisory, let's see if I can find it. 7.2, 8.2, 8.3, 8.5, and 8.6 are all end of software maintenance. So there is no patch for those, but they are vulnerable. So they may have to go to a newer version.
Exactly. In order to go to a newer version, need memory upgrade.
Right.
As I understand it anyway.
Which may not be trivial. That could be a problem.
That's right. Now there is, as far as I understand, a decent mitigation. We talked about the ACLs, but you can actually turn off the daemon, I guess, for want of a better term.
Yeah, if you're not using it.
Right.
Yeah, if you can basically remove all the crypto maps.
Exactly.
And it'll basically disable that functionality. But in general, again, I'm making a broad generalization. In general, you have to actively configure a crypto map on an ASA for it to be there, if I recall correctly. So it's not like somebody accidentally turned it on, most likely.
Well, that's I've heard conflicting stories on that.
Okay,
I'm more apt to your side makes more sense because it seems like there'd be a lot of configuration behind having to set it up. But again,
well, that is my assumption, right? Having done this only a couple of times, I'm not a professional Cisco admin at all. But I know enough to be dangerous and fumble my way through it with Google searches. Whenever I've had to do a VPN termination on an ASA, it seemed like there was a lot of setup to turn that stuff on.
Yeah.
So who knows? Things might have changed. So please do your own research on that. Do not take me as gospel on that one because I am not confident of that knowledge.
Yep. And get it fixed before you catch the internet on fire.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. Pretty big deal.
Yeah. So I have another question for you.
Okay. I'm ready.
What did one llama say to the other llama just before lunchtime?
Wow, the possibilities are endless as to what one llama... Tell me, Jerry, what did one llama say to the other llama just before lunchtime?
Let's have a picnic. Alpaca lunch.
Wow.
Yep. There you go, David.
All right. Our comedy roadshow will be kicking off in the fall.
That's right.
Visiting many, many key cities.
So moving on.
Spokane.
Gary.
Grand Rapids.
Gary, Indiana. Yep. That's right. So next story comes from SecurityWeek.com, and the title is We Can't Give Up on Preventing Breaches and Don't Give Up on This Podcast.
Thank God there's another story. I have most of my notes, by the way, are around this story.
All right. So, basically the gist of the story is we in the information security industry have become so damn enamored with detection and cleanup that we've abandoned protection, and that's just it's a terrible thing because if you don't, as he says, the axiom of prevention beating cure is definitely true, and therefore we really need to right our ship and get back to the business of protecting ourselves, and particularly if you hadn't known, the attack trends have moved away from the infrastructure and onto workstations. So
right, and why have they moved?
Well, because the data centers have become very sophisticated and well protected.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
Sure.
and they don't have Cisco's with big gaping fiery holes in front of them anymore. Just doesn't happen.
Speaking of big gaping fiery holes,
Yep, don't go there. Let's not go there.
regular listeners can't complete that joke.
So, you know, I'm of two minds on this one. On the one hand, we can't abandon prevention. He's right, but on the other hand, I'm not sure that we have. I think that we have to be realistic and say you can't run a show or you can't run a shop and completely block everything. And so you at some point you have to focus on on early detection, and that's what we've talked a lot about. And it's disappointing to see that focus being interpreted in this way. So I don't know what you said. You have a lot of notes. What do you have?
I pretty much eviscerated this story.
Have at it.
It's going to look like a llama roadkill when I'm done with it.
That sounds nasty.
It does. So a couple of quotes in here I want to pick out. So he starts off very quickly by saying that we have given up on preventative technology and have decided that data breaches are inevitable, and that we've, quote, shifted the lion's share of new spending into identification and cleanup, and are now neither demanding nor expecting that investments will prevent security incidents in the first place. I completely disagree with that statement. I do not think that's accurate at all. I don't think we're spending the vast majority of our money on breach detection. I would say we're probably 80% on prevention, because that is what is driving, let me say this another way. Our spending is being driven by what boards, auditors, compliance, and regulators demand. And the vast majority of those four constituencies demand breach prevention, not breach detection today. Now, we as an industry talk a lot about shifting to breach detection and breach containment, because we as an industry have realized that prevention as a sole technique is failing, and that there are ways that are going to continue to happen to get around breach prevention. So breach detection makes sense to augment breach prevention. However, in no way, shape, or form do I think that the vast majority of our spending is going towards breach detection and containment. I think that's complete BS. And I also don't think that we are not, expecting things out of our technologies. I think that our technologies that we have bought for breach prevention have been defeated, and it's an arms race that's going to continue. And he makes it sound so simplistic, and we're just not putting enough pressure on our vendors to give us adequate tools.
Yeah, I will say, in his defense, it's a subtle thing, but he does say that the vast majority of new spend, so think about the difference between, last year it was, let's say, $70 billion, and this year is $5 million. He's saying that most of that extra $5 billion in spending went to detection and cleanup versus, I don't think he's saying that anyway, maybe
I still don't know if that's true.
Yeah.
I don't think that's what's getting approved by boards and getting approved by CFOs and getting approved by, I just don't, because I don't think that the compelling third-party drive is there yet. I mean, we talk a lot about it, and we're playing with that, and a lot of VC money is going there, and there's a lot of work in that area, but I don't think it is catching the lion's share of spend right now.
But threat intelligence.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Then he goes on to say that in the mid-1990s, most common attacks were against servers and infrastructure. That's where the important data was. They could just go there and get it. But that was 20 years ago. Security for servers and hosting centers is now much better understood, and the problem is manageable with limited number of authorized user systems and predictable connections and transactions. Advances in security have created more secure data centers that are well known, and there are well-known best practices for locking down central shared resources against direct attack. I want to live in his happy world.
Like putting an ASA in front of it.
And then he goes on to say, in turn, now the bad guys have shifted to the endpoints because they're not protected. because the servers are too protected, and I would again call BS.
Yeah, when I read this story, the thought that came to my mind was, we should really stop making coal-fired power plants, because someday we will have fusion power.
Right. So
maybe.
My comment on this is the attackers still want the data on the servers. They still want it. The reason they go after the endpoint is not because the servers are so much better defended, but because of the rise of the always internet-connected, highly vulnerable endpoints.
Right.
And that are highly dynamic, that are, Flash and Java and every other mass remote access tool that you want. That's making it so much easier to get in that way. So the bad guys just go where it's easy, and endpoints are easy to get to, and then they pivot to go after the servers. Right? They still want the same thing. And then he talks about predictable transactions and connections, and I'm like, really? I would challenge you to show me an organization of any size over 1,000 users that can cleanly and easily baseline their server connections and know what's an anomaly without using baseline detection tools.
Look, all he's saying is that stop those attacks at the workstation. Like, put it in the little micro hypervisor that wraps around your browser and just stop it there.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a second. Hold your horses. I got more ranting to do first. So he's calling data centers more secure. I compared to what? I mean, the state of security has advanced, but so has the state of attacks. And how often do you see that servers are not necessarily segregated from the user networks? See that from time to time. I'm not so sure. If anything, I think we've decentralized more and moved more stuff to the cloud. And we don't have this tight, privileged control around our happy little data centers like we used to. I don't think we have clean little server segments anymore. I think stuff's all over the place. So, and by the way, he also quotes a Ponemon survey, which I know absolutely you love. So, for those playing
they're very, very reliable and accurate. Yes.
For those playing the drinking game at home, drink Ponemon survey, talking about the average time to detect 14 weeks a breach. So, to sum up, I have two final points. I told you I had a lot to say about this article. Yes, prevention beats cure, but I would not say that an industry we're even close to being too far in the breach detection side of things. Not even close. I would say 85 to 90% of our spend in energy and time is on breach prevention.
Yeah. Yep.
And whether it's vulnerability management, whether it's firewalls, whether it's
antivirus.
Antivirus.
Yep.
And finally, to sum up, the author of this article, Jack Danahy, co-founder and CTO of, wait for it, an endpoint security company called Barclay.
Wait. I can't believe that.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So here's my point. When you read these articles, you don't know when you're reading somebody's marketing pitch. You don't know if they're believing their own internal echo chamber. I have worked for startups. I have been there. These sorts of thought-through lines and these sorts of viewpoints are exactly what marketing, product management, and executive boards come up with to justify the valuation of their companies and to sell their product. So I'm not saying it's necessarily completely wrong that somebody who has a vested interest writes these articles, but what I'm saying is you have to look at who writes these articles and understand what their motivation is.
Well, that's a good point,
which is why we don't take vendor, sponsorship on the show.
That's right, and
all of them hate us.
Well, we have pissed every single one off. So,
there's a stealth startup in Santa Monica that we haven't pissed off yet.
They'll come onto the radar soon.
So anyway, point being, this guy's viewpoint is for lack of a better term, he's looking at the market as if it was 10 years from now, projected down the path they think they're going on. But in his mind, this is reality. I'm not saying that he thinks he's blowing smoke, but you get in this echo chamber internally when you start coming up with all these objection handling routines and what is our market space and what is the problem we're trying to solve and what is the problem we can solve. And it becomes the reality of a vendor. And then they view everything through the glasses of their reality. And you have to be careful about that.
That, by the way, is the one thing you should take away from this show.
Sorry, I told you I had a bit of a rant on this one. But once again, the vendors will define the problem space as the problem they can solve, not the problem the customer has.
That's right. They'll help you understand the problem.
All right, I'm done. That was it. That's my rant on that one.
That's okay. Well, I've got another story for you.
Another story or another question?
This one's a story.
Okay. All right. Please.
I wanted to tell you about a time that last year I went to see the Tigers. My family's, they're big fans of the Detroit Tigers. Since we grew up in Detroit, we went to spring training game down there and sitting in the stands watching the game. And I was paying attention to them throwing the ball around, and I'm like, why is the ball getting so big? And then it hit me. So moving on. Our next story comes from...
David, I want you to know this is your fault, David. You caused this, David. You know what you did. Think about what you've done.
The next one comes from CSO Online, and the title is Ransomware Takes Hollywood Hospital Offline. $3.6 million demanded by attackers.
Dear faithful listener, I want to tell you as well that he did not warn me or prepare me for any of these so-called jokes. None of them. This is my live, unvarnished reaction.
Is that what you call it? So, the Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center in, of all places, Hollywood, California, apparently fell victim to an unnamed ransomware attack.
Yeah, light on details.
But apparently it's really pervasive and has taken down just, I guess, as they describe, most of their systems are inoperable. They've had to divert patients to other hospitals, and they've had to, send patients that were already there to other hospitals. So really a pretty significant kind of attack. There is an anonymous consultant who gave a bit of data that there was a ransom being held for 9,000 bitcoins to unlock these computers. And the one thing that came to my mind was a story we talked about. I guess it was last week, maybe the week before, about I think it was the Dell SecureWorks had talked about a breach they had responded to, and in that case, there was a failed attempt to push out, do a mass distribution of ransomware. And I have to wonder, is this becoming a thing now? And
well, that Dell SecureWorks post never gave us any details as to why they suspected that the ransomware was a distraction from some other attack. But yeah.
Well, no, I mean, let's put aside for a second the distraction from another attack,
okay,
and focus back on, just hitting an organization hard with a mass ransomware campaign. Maybe the in vogue thing now is to get into your SCCM or whatever, Landesk, whatever centralized system you have to manage your endpoints, and push out some ransomware and lock everybody's computer and all their data, and then hold them for ransom because basically, as this hospital is, they're shut down. Indeed.
I will say that I think 3.6 million is really rich. I think it actually massively decreases their chances of getting that ransom. One thing we saw early on in the rise of ransomware was it appeared that the bad guys were trying to find the right market level for their ransom so that it was less painful to pay than do something else. When you're asking for 3.6 million, a lot of executives are going to look at some other options first.
Yeah. We've been thinking about upgrading our IT for a while now.
Right. So, I mean, I'm not trying to give the ransomware guys any advice, but, don't get greedy, guys.
There is another side to this, or another thought that I had, that what if that $3.6 million is not like a single ransom demand, but what if they had, I don't know, 100 or, let's say 1,000 PCs, asking for a couple $100 each?
That's possible. It just happened to add up to
yeah. Right.
Is it 900 or 9,000?
9,000 Bitcoins.
That could be.
Maybe they have 9,000 systems and each have a ransom of 1 Bitcoin. I don't know.
It's possible.
No details, but I think that here's the deal, right? I mean, we're starting to see it. I think, at least in my mind, a trend related to to ransomware, and it's pretty effective. There's lots of different variants. There's an almost infinite number of ways for this stuff to get into your environment, and I think the attackers are going to continue getting more creative at monetizing it, and this basically paralyzes your business like almost no other attack can.
That's true.
So,
speaking of Sony, I don't think we're covering it today, but I did see an article that the Sony hackers may be alive, well, and kicking.
I did see that, yes.
But if they're North Korea,
well, actually, I think wasn't the alleged victims of the continued hijinks of these attackers aimed at South Korea?
I'm just saying, Sony truther. maybe the Illuminati. See, I can't even say it. Had something to do with it.
Could be.
Mm-hmm.
It could very well be. So did I ever tell you about the time I got fired from a job?
Was it for telling bad jokes?
No. I worked at a calendar factory, and they fired me for taking some days off.
Wow.
So, moving on to our last story. This one comes from Ars Technica, and the title is Clever Bank Hack Allowed Crooks to Make Unlimited ATM Withdrawals.
I may start cutting myself again.
Okay. I'm sorry. Not sorry enough to stop telling bad jokes, but I'm sorry anyway.
Please don't write an iTunes review on this show, anyone, please.
Yeah. If this is your first show,
it'll probably be your last.
I highly recommend that you go listen to some other ones. Probably not 128, but
this is what happens when someone calls us out on Twitter. This is the power of Twitter.
I'm just having fun. I'm
glad it's fun for you. I'm in literal pain.
I think very highly of David. He's become a Twitter friend of mine, but hey, I'm having fun. So let's go. This here's the deal. There is a banking attack group called Metal, METEL, and they have a fairly sophisticated set of cyber attack tools that look an awful lot like what used to be called APTs. And this article describes a report, I think it was done by Kaspersky Labs, about some of the capabilities of this tool, which has like 30 separate modules that do different things. And they talk about a particular case, which I thought was really interesting and kind of highlights the sophistication of I won't say garden variety criminals, but the financially motivated criminals versus the nation state hackers. So the deal is this malware got into an unknown bank. I guess it was a Russian bank. Somehow it's theorized it was either through a watering hole web-based attack or phishing emails. The attackers moved laterally through the company's network. It's not said in here, but in another article I read, it was basically blamed on PowerShell. They were using PowerShell, and ended up planting a piece of malware that would back out ATM transactions for particular ATM cards. And effectively what it allowed these attackers to do was they set up an account that had some money, and they gave a debit card to a money mule, and they sent the money mule to a bank ATM, and that person withdrew some money. The malware reversed the transaction. The mule went to an ATM at a different brand, different bank brand, and did the same thing and kept doing it over and over and over again. And really highly effective. And I think that what was most interesting to me is the intersection of malware and kind of the more advanced cybery types of attacks with attacks on business processes. And I think this, by the way, I don't remember the exact amount of time, but the attackers here waited a fair amount of time between when they first got in and when they actually started cleaning out the ATMs. But point is that this is becoming a much more lucrative and much more sophisticated organization, organized crime type of thing. And so I think we're, as an industry, we need to be prepared for, the sophistication of attackers, in the space that the average organization has to worry about is going up dramatically.
Agreed, 100%. And this is something why we always sort of scoffed at. It must be state sponsored. It's just not true. They've been saying this for years and years about various different attacks. Probably there's some out there that certainly were and could only be. But the vast majority that I feel were alleged to have been state-sponsored, I disagreed with that assessment because the bad guys are financially motivated and they've got clever, smart programmers. And it's such a collaborative effort now when you've got these kits being built and updated and maintained. It's a whole ecosystem of continually evolving and advancing malware. And so here, when you're looking at something that's got 30 different modules that tailored to the computer it's infecting, it's a real hands-off kind of smart, sophisticated methodology that they can throw at somebody. It doesn't need to be nation state to do this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, the bad guys are going to go where the money is. That's what it really comes down to. And here they're going after financial institutions. And what's really interesting about this that occurs to me is, this was all Russia-based, 29 organizations in Russia. But in the U.S., in general, we have a fairly regulated and common business practice around banking and fairly typical best practices. I wonder if that could ever be used against us in terms of tailoring malware and like you mentioned here, having good business sense around the business practices. If the majority of our banking institutions are following similar business practices, I wonder if that makes a malware attack more successful because they sort of have some advanced recon already done by knowing what sort of techniques and business tactics most of our banks employ.
I strongly suspect there is some possibility there. I do wonder, though, if this is kind of where maybe some of the threat intel, FS-ISAC type stuff starts to come in, because again, if you are a homogeneous type
right.
vertical, right, maybe that's where it can help.
Yeah, most of the stuff on the FS-ISAC portal and mailing lists are confidential. So in theory, the concept is that you would share information amongst the members of the ISAC, and the FS-ISAC is the Financial Services ISAC, if you're not familiar. And the ISAC, by the way, is a series of groups set up by, I think, the FBI? Who set them up originally? Can't remember.
Was the Department of Homeland Security, wasn't it?
Okay. But anyway, it's specific verticals share information amongst themselves in general, basically, about their specific threat vectors and threats. So it's it is threat intelligence, but it's not like a packaged vendor offering.
Right.
But just for those who may not be familiar with the ISAC structures, some are well regarded, some are not. I guess it depends on the vertical.
Yeah. The financial services one is probably one of the more organized and well run, from what I've seen at least. But there are lots of them, and I think they are tending to mature pretty rapidly right now in the current environment.
Unlike your jokes.
Well, that's probably true. So anyway, I really think, and I've talked a lot about this in the past, but all of these attacks kind of feed on each other, and so when we learn about something that the NSA did, or the Mossad did, or MI5 or MI6 did, or GCHQ or whatever, the bad guys are watching, right? And I'm not saying that we shouldn't talk about that stuff. I guess I'm just saying that there are a lot of opportunities for attackers to become very refined in their techniques, and they seem to be taking advantage of them. And that's going to make our jobs a hell of a lot harder going forward, and we need to get ready.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is there's, like anything, a bell curve of attacker sophistication. So not all attackers are moving up the bell curve at the same rate.
Well, that is true, with the exception that a lot of this stuff is becoming also as a service-ified, so they're
right.
And that's one of the things that is probably most concerning to me, is that you're right. There are not a lot of super sophisticated criminals out there, and unfortunately for us, a lot of the ones that are, have figured out that they can distance themselves from, the dangers of law enforcement by just offering up the tools for other people to go and use. So, although even that, we have seen a number of exploit kit authors being arrested recently, and so. It's not without its risks, but I do think it's a problematic development.
Yep, I would agree. And like anything, it's going to continue to be an arms race.
Indeed. So I have one more for you.
Oh yeah?
Before we go, yeah, that's right. And it's not a story. It's kind of a little story. But I was at the grocery store the other day.
Just so you know, I have one more actually useful thing to add to the show after, so please stay with us, please.
Okay.
Don't quit yet, because I'm going to give a Norse Corp update, which is actually kind of interesting.
Oh yeah.
So if you can suffer through whatever it is Jerry's about to do, there might be a reward. Fortunately, most podcast apps have a fast forward or skip forward button. Just saying. Okay, go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, you'll want to hit that button in like maybe 20 seconds. So anyway, I was at the grocery store. It was in the vegetarian section, where they have the veggie burgers and stuff. And
Sure.
And a lady, it's Jerry, and she's like, I know you, and I'm like, who is this? And as it turns out, she thinks she knows me, right? But in reality, I had never met her before. So anyway, Norris, go ahead.
I'm going to need a minute. All right, so I was curious what was shaking with Norse Corp, so I did a little Google searching, and found a article put out by the Wall Street Journal CIO Report, which is one of their blogs, called Norse. Excuse me. Norse names new CEO after a series of management problems, and this was put out on February 11th. And so, hopefully everybody's followed the Norse Corp, where they disappeared and came back, and craziness ensued, and they fired their old CEO, and there's now a new president, Howard A. Bain. Probably not Bane from the Batman fame, but nonetheless, new president, CEO, interim CFO. So lots of interesting stuff in here, and the one thing I wanted to pull out it's worth reading, but just in the interest of time, there's this one paragraph I want to read that was new, I think, to the story. Quote, the last few weeks have been what Mr. Bain described to CIO Journal as a perfect storm, which included the sales miss, scuttled investment, large-scale layoffs, a management change, now here's the important part, and a so-called DNS attack by hackers that knocked its website and attack map offline and brought down its internal email systems for about a week. The company is still repairing the damage, said Mr. Bain. There are now about 40 employees at the company, said Mr. Bain. At its height last year, there were 92 employees. So when their website and attack map went down, we all assumed that it had something to do with the organization having issues. They're now alleging that this was some kind of DNS attack. Now, if it took down multiple websites and email, that seems to me like their main A records got scuttled or blocked for some reason, because the MX records were blocked, the DNS was blocked. I don't know. I would like to go back in time, if I could, and actually do some DNS lookups and see what was going on at the time this occurred. But that's interesting news to me.
I wonder if someone hijacked their domain, something like that. It's hard to say. I mean, I would imagine if you are having great organizational strife and someone attacks you, it's probably going to impact your ability to respond, especially if if you had to lay off many of your response people.
Yeah, certainly. And I will say, from my experience, InfoSec startups have typically don't invest heavily in dedicated IT. They usually are doing double duty with various folks.
Yeah, and I mean, it comes back to the deal of, do you let a few people go or do you let everybody go? And so
right.
It's an unfortunate thing. So yes, the story continues to unfold. You know what was most interesting though is that story came out and that didn't make news. I mean, that seems like something that would have been very newsworthy.
I agree. That's why I tweeted it out. I normally, Norse stuff gets pretty popularly spread around, at least within the Twitter circles we circle in, but not this one. So I don't know. It's interesting. I will say that the attack map and the website is up and functioning right now, and they, for all intents and purposes, appear to be a going concern and are charging forward.
Back in business. It is interesting though that they didn't see that coming with the map and all.
That is actually what somebody replied when I tweeted that out. So the map see this coming. It's funny. That is funny. Hey, you had a good joke, Gary. Good job.
Damn it! But somebody else got it before me. Oh well. So anyway, yeah, that was our show.
Please forgive us.
Let's not do that again.
Wow.
Anyway.
After 150 episodes, you got to do something to spice it up.
I would not recommend emailing us after this episode. I would not recommend leaving iTunes feedback after this episode.
Although I will say we did get some really nice iTunes feedback recently.
We did.
Thank you, whoever posted that. Thank you. We you would think after a while it sort of, doesn't have the same effect, but every time we get a glowing review or kind words, it's awe-inspiring and humbling, and we really, really do appreciate it.
It definitely is, and that's, at least for me, that's why I do it. I love helping people. I love hearing that we help people. We got some comments that just the first part of our discussion last week helped someone with their vulnerability management program. So
that's great, and I do it because the judge ordered it as community service. But
well, I mean, we all have our reasons. So anyway, you can find the links to the stories we talked about on our website, www.defensivesecurity.org. And, with that, we will talk again next week, hopefully with, some better jokes. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. I'll see you soon.
See ya.
What?
Hello, Grandpa.
I'm not wearing any pants.
So basically normal Monday night, huh?
My feet smell like cheese. Feel free to retweet that. And by that I mean you better fucking retweet that bitch.
Wow. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye-bye.